Well, welcome everyone to the most exciting place to be on the planet tonight, doing a research and writing seminar, which is probably as much fun as going to a traffic school. You know, I used to actually teach traffic school. I did it for a brother. Yeah, he asked me if I could teach some traffic school for him, and I said, "Well, I'll tell you what. If you pay for me, you know, to get the license, I'll help you out for a summer." And boy, that was a project. Imagine on a Saturday day, right, from morning, from like 9 o'clock until like 3 o'clock in California, you know, in San Diego, a beautiful day, palm trees and everything. Everyone feels like they're unjustly there.
That's literally a captive audience.
And they're all in there in that room. Yeah, they're all there, and you got to talk to them for a day. And I would go around the room, and I would say, "Let's all go around the room. Tell us what your ticket was in, and what's one thing you could have done to avoid that." And every time we'd go around the room, and every one of them was innocent. Every time. It was never their fault, ever. And I would just laugh because I did about 4 or 5 of these classes over the summer. And I used to laugh because it was like doing some research. I would always ask that question. Like, it's amazing how we like fill this room up time after time again with absolutely innocent people that are just unjustly in here and ruining a whole day with them. But it's just, you know, no one wants to go to traffic school. You go to it. Well, you guys are brave. You guys are here. You didn't have to be. It's voluntary. So I'm gonna pray. I'm gonna give you some background. I'm gonna blast through these PowerPoints, and I don't want you to feel like you need to reproduce what's in the PowerPoint. Just enjoy it because they might even already be posted on our library website. If not, I'm gonna give this one, you know, to Jennifer, and even this video will probably be available. That sort of thing. So you don't have to worry about capture this. Just kind of, as we say when we travel, you know, sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight. So let's pray. Lord, thank you for tonight. Thank you for my brothers and sisters. I pray, Lord, that as we devote this bit of time tonight, it would go towards us developing our skills in thinking and in writing and in speaking and in all those related tasks. Because, Lord, we're here to grow not only in knowledge, skills, and abilities, but we are also here to be transformed more and more into the image of your Son and to be a people that you are pleased to reproduce. So, Lord, bless our time tonight. May it be very fruitful, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. So I've done this seminar like a bazillion times. I've talked about this stuff a bazillion times. I've done it at the undergrad level, at the graduate level, at the doctoral level. I've done it in multiple colleges, universities, seminaries. Basically, here's the way I approach this. I'm kind of playing both sides of the fence because I'm going to literally tell you what I am looking for, which means what we look for from the professor side. Here's what we're looking for. Here's what we like to see. Here's how you, and then on the student side, with all my degrees, I get it, right? I'm going to tell you something I wish someone would have told me. Right? And so I'm going to tell you, here's how we do that. Here's the kind of things you need to keep in mind. So I'm going to take you through this process, and it's going to be super fun, right? It's almost going to be like you're having a steak dinner somewhere. Oh, if it works. There's always that, because this thing does a strange thing. It makes me, for some reason, push those 2 buttons, and then it goes up again. And then I have to go over there every once in a while and push the 2 buttons. I don't know why. But part 1, introduction. There's 4 parts, by the way. So going right on to part 1, introduction to research. Here's kind of a basic 4-part definition. A working definition for academic writing and research is it's a systematic search, which means there are stages. There are steps in an order, in a sequence, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a systematic, you have an intentional search, which means you're trying to discover something. So we always say you're starting with a question mark, not an exclamation mark. It's an inquiry. It's what we call the nature of inquiry, of learning something, of studying and learning. So basic four-part definition is it's a systematic search. So it's something that's linear, it's moving towards something, it's step by step, and it's a discovery, it's a search for adequate information, right? So if you're in a bachelor's degree level, it's at that academic discipline level. If you're in a graduate program, it's at that level. If you're in a postgraduate doctoral program, it's at that level. And all the things I'm going to talk to you about, it's like going to the gym, right? It's not a bad idea to go more than once. So that's what I'm saying. This stuff doesn't matter if you're working on your doctorate, working on your master's, or working on your undergrad. It's not a bad idea to reacquaint yourself with this stuff over and over again. But the systematic search for adequate information. So if you're in an undergrad program, if you're in a master's, if you're in a postgraduate, it's adequate, meaning at that level. And we're talking about academic writing tonight. So we're not talking about any kind of a personal reflection kind of a writing. That's a different. What we're talking about is when you're doing like a major paper in one of your classes, a research paper, something usually like a final paper, that sort of thing. We're looking for academic writing. And that means you have to kind of put on a certain kind of hat. I'll use them as an example right over there. Because it's a kind of writing and a kind of voice and a kind of presentation that we're looking for. So it's a systematic search for adequate information to reach objective knowledge. So you're not writing fiction. You're not just doing an editorial, not just giving your own subjective thoughts on how things work. In academics, what you're doing is you're looking for objective knowledge. Objective knowledge means that your ideas, your concepts, your terms, they're connected to documentation, to peer-reviewed articles, to peer-reviewed published books and papers. And they're objective, they're not subjective. There's something that you can cite and that can support your terms, right? Your statements. So we're looking for documentation. What we talk a lot about is academic engagement and interaction with academic sources. And so you're going to hear us talk a lot about that tonight. It's a systematic search for adequate information to reach objective knowledge related to a specific topic. So every paper you write has a primary thesis, right? In this paper, we will compare and contrast the 4 major views on sanctification. See, so it's very clear what you're going to write on. It's very, very clear what you're going to do, right? You're going to compare and contrast. That's going to be the type of analysis, the type of cognitive engagement is going to be to compare and contrast. So we know those are some things you can do. What are you going to compare and contrast? 4 major views on sanctification. So you're not going to do 3, you're not going to do 5, and you're not going to talk about other terms, other things. You're not going to talk about millennial views on the return of Christ. It's specifically focused in this paper. That's going to be your main thesis. And you know, we just had Halloween not so long ago, right? So it's like a skeleton. It's like your thesis statement is like the head, and the thesis is the spine that runs all the way through your paper. And every main point that you make is like a rib cage, right? Can you see it? It's got a head and a spine, and every topic number 1, number 2, number 3, conclusion. And it's all related to this thesis, right? And that's how the paper works. It's very focused. So if you put that all together, you have a systematic search for adequate information to reach objective knowledge related to a specific topic. So here's some pitfalls to avoid. Prejudice, presuppositions, and preferences. Kind of some 3 Ps. I just made that up. But if you want to think about these as these 3 Ps. Now, what's the worst bias to have? Because there is one.
Prejudice?
No. It's to think that you don't have one. So what you do is, right, what you need to do is demonstrate that you can state and understand your bias and what we call bracketing. I need to be able to identify and bracket my bias so that I can set it aside. Because this happens all the time in higher education. You walk in the institution understanding and believing A. And you come into a school situation and you hear about B and C. And the average student, when they hear about B and C, how do they feel about it? They can't be right.
Disagree.
Yeah, they disagree. They can't be right. Why? Because because they've never heard of that. They've only heard A. Surely the option that they know would have to be the right one. It's the one that they understand. And so we all have done this. Trust me, I've had times where I've gone over scripture with people, and I would say, well, you know, that text is really not referring to that. Because they said, yeah, this text is about this. And I go, well, no, that's really not what it's about. And they go, well, that's what I've always understood that to mean that. And I go, I used to also. And then I learned something. That was actually with someone I could joke around a little bit with, you know.
Right.
But you see what I'm saying? Because I kind of joked and you kind of looked at me. So, you know, we had that relationship. But I mean, that's the point. I used to think that too, but now I think differently. So if your idea is that you're going to go spend time, energy, and money in higher education and not think differently, don't go buy a coloring book instead, you know. Just stick with your current understanding. So you're going to be introduced to B and C. Some of you may believe A, some of you B, some of you C. All of you are going to hear all about A, B, and C. So you have to realize I'm all about A, but I need to listen to B and C. Right? That's what I'm here to do, is to learn and to grow. If we can't teach you nothing, then you don't need to be here. And if you don't have any kind of, you know, trust me, if I look back at myself in like 5-year increments, if I could go back in time and tell, you know, 20-year-old Gino something, right? Can you imagine? He'd be like, right, sure. I mean, stuff really does change. I won't preach. But anyway, so you need to be able to, some pitfalls to avoid. Number one is to realize coming into this in an academic venue, in an academic context, you have certain experiences, knowledge, beliefs, understandings, and that's fine. You need to be able to bracket them and be able to engage in other ideas, which then may support your idea. It may strengthen your current state of understanding. It might refine it. It might change it. Those are all good and valid options, right? Okay, number 2, hurriedness, inaccuracy, and carelessness. When are those most likely to happen? When you procrastinate. You know, I'm just going to put off my procrastination until later. I won't even bother procrastinating now. I'm even going to procrastinate my procrastination. No, it's true. And so what's funny is, see, this is where I'm telling you from both sides of the fence, as a professor, it's hilarious to me when I know that an assignment is due like by midnight, and it tells me what time you submitted your paper, and it says like 11:58, and I'm like, really? Like you had like 3-4 weeks to do this, and you're sitting there, 11:56, 11:57, 11:58, send, upload. I'm like, really? I'm not going to look at it till tomorrow morning anyway. Why would you? So when I see that, it just cracks me up. You know what I'm saying? It cracks me up when I look at there and I see the little timestamp. It says 11:58. I just crack up. I smile when I'm grading your papers because I'm like, what else happens? I see people upload papers that still have yellow highlight on them. Because they were trying to leave themselves a note to remember to do a thing. Or, you'll hear me talk about this a little bit, they're using our template for how to write papers, which is brilliant, that Jennifer Ewing, our librarian, has available through our website on the library. They're using that, and it still has some little trick, like add resources here, you know? So I can tell, so you uploaded your first draft, right? You just didn't even bother. So you get the inaccuracies and carelessness at times. Sometimes, and some of the stuff that I write back on the papers, like sometimes like the last page of the paper too has a different font type, right? The whole thing is in Times Times New Roman 12-point font, but except for the last page is like in Arial or something. Or what's the other one they defaults to? Yeah, what's the other one? Anyway, it's in that, and then the reference page is in a third font. Because they like copied it and cut it and put it in there. I'm like, what? I'm like, really? Hurriedness, inaccuracy, and carelessness. It happens when we procrastinate. When we don't go through and really say, is this quality? And let me see what I'm doing here. We just upload the thing at 11:58. I just go, oh my God, let me look and see what this is. What did they send me at 11:58? You know, this is going to be fun. One of these days, I'm going to do like a little joke thing on what professors would like to put on the papers. Because we're supposed to be we're trying to be really kind. Oh, that's good. Hey, make sure you do this next time, and we really like this part, but this would be good. Sometimes I want to just send a little note back. Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Okay, now send me your real paper. No, I don't do that. I just think about it. Okay, research mindset. Again, it's the nature of inquiry. It's the idea of you discovering something finding it out. Think of yourself as like an intellectual Indiana Jones, where you're out searching for information, new ideas. Objectivity, which means it's related to the existing research. It's supported by and referenced by the existing research. Third, there's clear presuppositions in what you're trying to accomplish. In other words, when someone reads your paper, it should stand alone. It should clearly explain who, what, when, where, why, and how. If your paper needs you to verbally explain it, it's not written well. Because that's the idea of creating a written document, is that it should stand alone and it should convey everything that needs to be known about that. So it should have focus. It shouldn't ramble. It shouldn't be going in all these different ways. It should stay on task. You should have your thesis in mind and write with that kind of focus. And it should have intellectual honesty, which has to do with plagiarism and ideas and factually and honestly presenting your information, citing sources as needed. And then with humility, because none of us have the last word in something, and so you want to use that kind of tentative voice and not have your academic writing be a thing where it's just a polemic and you're just blasting something. What academic writing is not, what it's not. It's not a personal reflection. That's not really what we're looking for. It's not a defense or an apology of personal convictions. Now, you give different kinds of assignments to different kind of classes. Right? So if the assignment says to do a thing, then you do that. If it's a personal reflection, you do it. If it's to offer a defense or to critique something, then you offer critique. But if it's just more of a research paper, an academic paper, a final paper, we always default, we meaning every school, all the schools I've worked at, all the places where I lecture and teach, everywhere, every major university, everything. Same kind of an idea. It's going to be either APA format, right, for behavioral science, or it's going to be Turabian. I think finally a couple of years ago, Bethel made it so you could do APA for both. But it used to be Turabian Turabian was more for history, philosophy, theology, that sort of thing. And then APA is for business, organizational leadership, psychology, those kind of things, sociology. Those are the disciplines. And so we still do that too. We're not ready to give up on that yet. So we want to make sure, because that's part of the discipline. It's not a polemic, strongly critical, or controversial dispute. And this is what's kind of interesting, because of things like Facebook and tweets and blogs and all this vitriol and social media, which I'm still convinced is going to be the downfall of humanity. But that's a whole other lecture. We're kind of training people to think in disconnected text segments and unsupported claims. And now, because of social media, we have what I refer to as the proliferation of the unqualified opinion, where because a person thinks they have a voice, they should use it, and it matters. And it matters differently. So just because you have something to say doesn't mean it's worth saying or worth listening to. We want to say that it is from a social aspect, but from an actually academic, there's actually a book I'm getting ready to read. It's called I think it's called The Death of Expert Knowledge. It's where there's people feeling like any human opinion is just as valuable as anybody else's opinion. And this is kind of a disrespect for any expert knowledge. I've got a little exercise I do in my organizational leadership programs, and it's called the Winter Survival Guide. And it's where you crash land in this frozen wasteland, and it gives you all the conditions, and it says and you have these 12 items available to you. And it says, now, as a small group together, come to it with a group decision. It's a group decision project. Do you remember that one? Have you heard of it?
I did.
Okay, so what you do is everybody sit down now, and we're going to break you up into 4 groups, and I want each one of you to together come to a group decision on how you would order these 12 items in importance to your survival. You've got these 12 items, you guys discuss them, put them in order. So you guys will work on, so it's an exercise for group dynamics and leadership communication, and so everyone does their thing. And at the end, I say, okay, now let's see how your ranking of the 12 items compares to the expert opinion on these survival lists. And just like traffic school, where every time I do it, everybody's innocent, every time I do this exercise, I read off the answers of the experts, and everyone disagrees with them. No, that's not right. They don't know what they're talking about. That's no good. That you get yourself killed doing that. Everybody in the room knows better than the experts. Why? Because that's not what they thought. That's their sole criteria. Well, so in academics, you can't just have this disputation that's not supported by any literature. And so, honestly, and you'll hear me say this a little later as well, when I go a whole page in a research paper, an academic paper that you turn in, if I see a whole page with no citations, no interacting with sources, you're just free writing. You're just free writing, right? You don't need to go to school. Here we want to see you interacting with academic sources. That's what we do. That's our hammer and pliers and screwdrivers. And we don't just write something and turn it in. We need to have these things connected to the literature. So it can't just come out of your head and be passionate. And anyway, not the presentation of one's opinions, we kind of just said. Not a sermon unless you're in a class, unless you're in a homiletics class, where you're asked to write a sermon. That'd be different. But typically, you can't just write a sermon. Does that make sense? And I know because we get a lot of people that come from different backgrounds, and a lot of times they haven't written academic papers. Some students have never, or some students haven't in a long time. Is that you for both of those?
Technical IT stuff.
Right. So we get back. So watch this. We get people with backgrounds. We get people that are veterinarians, engineers. They go into the MDiv program, and their graduate degree was in kinesiology. So we get people of all ages and different places in life that really have either never done academic writing, or they haven't done it in a long time. Hopefully when you leave tonight, you're going to say, that was worth me being there, and this gave me some good ideas on how I can get this done right. So here's my little mousetrap, academic research thinking. This is something I want you to kind of, an illustration. So if we were to analyze this mousetrap, we would literally examine its component parts and deconstruct it, right? We would understand what the little wood piece, what its function is. We take it all apart. You ever seen, like when you're a kid, you want to take the radio apart, see what makes it work? It never works. It never goes back together. It's a fail. All you do is destroy it. You deconstruct it, can't put it back. The mousetrap, you break down the little parts you understand. And imagine if you took that mousetrap and you laid out all the components here. A couple things you need to know. You need to know 2 things about this mousetrap. What are the different parts individually? What's the function of each one? And how do they work together? And it happens to be that this mousetrap is what we call an irreducible mechanism. Which means if you take away one of the parts, it doesn't work anymore. I mean, you can still call it a mousetrap, but it won't trap a mouse. So it's not functionally a mousetrap. It is by an object a mousetrap, but it won't trap a mouse. So functionally speaking, it's not a mousetrap anymore. So anything you take away from it, and it doesn't work. So if I come at this as a concept, let's say that this mousetrap is sanctification. Well, sanctification, the idea, the concept term sanctification, means a number of things. It has a number of categories underneath that concept. There's a number of terms and verses and ideas that all go into understanding sanctification, justification, self-identity, right? Self-efficacy, say if you're in behavioral science, and you say self-efficacy, and someone says, well, what does that mean? And then you start to describe what it means. Do you see that? You have to break it down into these other terms, because there's components to it. So to analyze something means to examine or deconstruct the idea and concept. So just like you would do that with a mousetrap, you're going to have to be able to deconstruct sanctification and then write about it. That way, when you talk about sanctification, you can then understand the component parts to it and the ideas and write about those. And then you bring in your citations and you demonstrate a very strong working knowledge of sanctification, because you can break it down into its related ideas, cite verses, cite authors. That's academic writing. It's doing in a cognitive, intellectual way what you would do if you were going to analyze and this little thing. So describing, classifying, understanding the component parts, the connections, causes, consequences. That happens both in the physical and in the intellectual. So this little mousetrap is kind of a handy little tool. Next is evaluation. What we do with academic work as well as physical things, we evaluate them. We assess the credibility, the value. We look at the strengths and weaknesses in a theory, an idea. We can read other authors, and they'll point out those are pro and cons of things that are for and against, different views. So there needs to be an evaluation. So you write about that. That's part of your writing. Good academic writing evaluates the sources and the ideas. It doesn't just present them. And then finally, an application, using information and concepts. So here's how you would use this. Here's how this matters. Here's how this works out in real life. And this is also kind of what we call the research funnel. And you'll hear me refer to this in a number of times, a number of ways. A funnel is basically the idea of taking something that starts off kind of broad and bringing it to the point. So if you hear get to the point, the idea of the research funnel, the writing funnel, the analysis funnel is, again, you're starting kind of broad and bringing it down, right? Background, development, conclusion, right? Kind of analyzing these are the main ideas, the concepts. This is how they work together. These are the strengths and weaknesses. This is how it matters. See, so again, you're kind of, have you ever seen those, the coin thing? You throw the coin in there, right? So the same thing, as you're reading through this paper, it takes you there. It gets to the point, and then it's done, right? And it's focused on this thesis. So this is the idea. We're going to talk about that in a number of ways. So here's some goals and benefits to academic writing. Why do we have you write papers? Okay, because watch this. I travel all around the country and even outside the country, and you talk to students and you say, "What's the most challenging thing about school?" And they say, "Writing the papers." So then I also talk to faculty all across the country. Talk to faculty all the time. And I say, why? What do you really love about teaching? What do they never say? Yeah. Grading the papers. Yeah. Right? So the students, biggest challenge, writing the papers. Faculty, not the reason they're there. I understand it. So I can make everybody happy real quick, right? It's not have papers anymore. We won't write papers. The students will be like, yay! You're the king, you're the king. You get to have all the popcorn. They put me, enthrone me. They would just enthrone me. Yay, you're wearing the robe. And then the faculty would say, yay, there's no more papers to grade. We're free, the shackles are ripping whoa. And so it'd be a wonderful thing, because then all they have to do is stand up there, talk, and leave. Lecture and leave, the 2 L's. Lecture and leave. Faculty love to do that. They love to talk at you while you're sitting there and then leave. But they don't, you put up with it. They love it. Anyway, this is my one opportunity to modify your thinking. There is real value. And there's real value. Did I mention there's real value in you writing a paper, in me writing a paper? There's formation that happens in us. So watch this. When you turn in that paper, it's an artifact. You've created something. And what it does, it represents your ability to identify and evaluate sources of information. And that's important. And you practiced identifying and evaluating sources of information. Now, for all the things I'm going to show you on this list, if you looked at one of your first semester papers and one of your last final papers, you're going to see real improvement. And it's going to be documented in those papers. But every time you have to sit down and write that paper, do that, you're having to do this, and you're gaining ability to do this. You had to analyze and synthesize ideas and concepts. And that's an important thing to be able to do, is to analyze and synthesize ideas and concepts. That's very, very important. You had to organize and structure information effectively. That's going to help you in all areas of your life, personal and professional, because these are things that we value. Organize and structure information to develop personal knowledge and perspectives. You will learn more by writing a paper on something than from hearing a lecture on it. Right? If I tell you, write a paper on 1 Thessalonians, you're gonna get a lot of learning. Have you ever studied for something because you're gonna present it? Typically you end up studying way out to here just to present this much. So you've gained and developed personal knowledge and perspective on something. Now let me tell you what I did about that. Let me tell you the student side. So my whole time when I was working on my MDiv, when I was doing my master's degree, I was also pastoring. I was in full-time ministry. I had family, the whole thing. So I always, every time I could, I tried to make sure that things I was writing in class and different projects and assignments fit with something going on in my life and my ministry, so that I could utilize it. Right? So I could use it for Bible study, I could preach it, I could use it in my professional life. Now, often the faculty didn't necessarily go out of their way to make the assignment relevant. So I took it upon myself as the student to make it relevant. So I picked a certain topic that I was interested in, something that worked for me in different ways. That way I end up with something that I value on another personal, practical, professional level. So I did that because I said, I wanted to do this. Anyway, to communicate information ideas clearly and logically. When you practice writing and you understand the thesis and you understand how to develop your points, how to stay focused, it improves your speaking and your teaching. Because usually people who can order their thoughts, analyze well, and write well, they speak well. They don't ramble, they stay on task, and they can work through things, and they're more clear and they're more logical in their presentation. So you're actually training yourself on how to communicate information. Also, to utilize time efficiently in research and scholarship. Because everybody in this room, I can guarantee there's one thing in here that we all are challenged with, we all struggle with, we all try to get better at, and that's time management. And we all have exactly the same time, right? You know what I'm saying? I'm just as guilty as anybody else could be in this room, right? I come to work every day with my 5 things, and 3 get buried right on top of it, and my 5 things become 7 and translate to the next day, and to the next day, and this nice woman over here, I've been trying to talk to her for a month and a half. I can't even show her. It's even on my thing. It's and then I'm traveling, and then I'm back, and I get to town, I work all day and teach 2 classes at night, and it's the next day, and I leave town again, come back a week later, I'm going here, I'm writing a book, I'm speaking here, doing it. All of a sudden, it's a month later. All of a sudden, it's 2 months later. And you're like, oh my gosh, the thing just keeps piling on. Time management is huge. We all have the same exact stuff to work with. So we all have to just get better at managing the stuff that we have, right? So I've decided to stop sleeping. So I'm just going to drink more coffee and not sleep. It's a complete waste of time, right? You're just laying there like you're dead, doing nothing. What good is that? I'm just joking. Don't take me serious. All your hair will fall out if you do that. No, you don't even. That's right. That was hilarious, right? Come on. Utilizing time efficiently in research and scholarship. Very important. And you have to, that's a goal of me making you write a paper. You know what I'm talking about. You haven't been sleeping much lately. All right, qualities of a good researcher writing. And I think we've said all this, so let me just throw them up there. Clear articulated thesis, it demonstrates a strong understanding of the topic. So when I read your paper, I understand you did a pretty good job of studying and understanding sanctification. Demonstrates an adequate understanding of alternative views and arguments, right? Because that's important to show that you understand multiple views on these different things. presents information in a clear, concise, and logical way, provides strong verifiable supporting material, properly cited and documented. It's written in proper format, which could be for some of your APA, some of your Arabian. We'll come back. Okay, so part 2. Anybody need a break? Anybody want to run screaming into the night? Okay. Anyone want to but won't say it? Okay, here's the big picture. I'll read this real quick. Step 1, laying the groundwork, understanding the assignment, what we're asking you to do, identifying your initial sources. They need to be peer-reviewed, academic peer-reviewed sources. Determining your subject and topic. Sometimes it's given to you. Sometimes you're asked to choose something within a range. Develop your working thesis. It's going to be modified, but you need to come up with a basic idea, topic, and thesis you want to work with. Step 2 is where you actually start working with these sources. You got to go out there and locate them, use the library, find the books, find the dissertations, find the journal articles, find the papers, analyze them, spend time with them, develop your ideas, do effective note-taking, which is super important that people don't understand how important that is. And then be able to organize and outline your thoughts. And then you finally do step 3, which is write the paper. And some people think that step 3 is step 1. Right? Turn on the computer and start writing. It's like, nuh-uh. You're already working on your paper, but look, you're working on it all through this. Structure and format, super important. Academic writing style, those are all things we look for. Citing and quoting sources. Now watch, there's in a typical assignment, there's points. There's points assigned to all these things. So there's points. There's points for format, writing style, writing mechanics, formatting, all these things. Those things have all the points in them. Look, there's a step 4. What? Whoever would do such a silly thing? Revising the paper. So you have to leave yourself enough time to do some proofreading and some editing and do a final draft and then turn that thing in the day before instead of 11:58. No way. You just think, no way. But anyway, some people are like, what? There's a 4th step? Well, yeah. You should do this final step. Sometimes that last step can be the difference in the letter grade. So, just saying. All right, so number 1, laying the groundwork. Understand the assignment, the syllabus rules. So make sure you know the syllabus, ask questions, ask the faculty questions. What are you looking for? And I know what you're kind of looking for. I know you want to know how many words, you want word count, how many pages, you want to know this or that. So that's kind of usually in there. So make sure you understand the syllabus, what it's asking for. Make sure you understand the assignment. If you're not clear on something, ask questions. We're happy to talk about that. Make sure you understand what's going on. Create an assignment schedule. Now watch, this is important. So after all these years, I've got my technology, but I'll tell you what, I will confess that with all my tablets and phones and laptops and everything, I still have to have my paper scheduler. So I can take my little tab and open it up to November. And I've got to literally be able to see November, all the different weeks. It's the month of the view. To me, the week of the view doesn't really help it so much. I have to look at the whole month. Now watch this. Here's where the time management comes in. So when you take a look, now again, I'm telling you this from the student side. Let's say here's the beginning of a mod of a 7-week class, and here's the end. First thing you do is you say, what are the due dates on papers? Right? Here's today, here's the due date. Okay, that's important. Here's today, here's 3 weeks from now, here's the due date. Right? Here's today, here's 5 weeks from now, here's the due date. So I need to make sure I know where that is. But now I've got to identify intermediate dates. Right? Right? Here's where it gets tricky. So here's today, here's when it's due, but I need time. I need to spend this week identifying sources. I got to spend these so many days writing, the outline. I'm going to have this week here to maybe finish writing that paper. I got to have a couple days to review and proofread and revise it, and I got to turn it in. So it's like project management. You work backwards. Here's today. Here's when it's due. What are the steps that I have to do? I have to go down to the library. I got to look. So you've got to really project manage this. That's the only way to succeed. And to get in a rhythm of doing that is super important. Like I said, sometimes we tell you exactly what the length of paper. Sometimes faculty will tell you, make sure you use 12, our journal articles. So make sure you include 10. So you just need to make sure you're looking at that and knowing what's being asked. if there's a specific topic. I remember one time I was asked, the topic was to select one of the problem passages in 1st or 2nd Corinthians. It was on a class on the Corinthian correspondence. It was called Corinthian correspondence. And the professor gave us like a list, like 20 possible verses, or passages we could choose that were considered problem passages. They either had some problems as far as textual variation in the Greek text, or with different ways they were translated in English, different kind of meanings, obscure meanings, some different ways that churches have understood them. So we still got to pick, but within a limited set, within a subset. So sometimes that's right in the syllabus. Step 1, continuing, identify initial sources. We, the faculty, we give you some initial sources hints right away. So in your syllabi is the books we chose as being the best books for you to use. Secondly, there's usually a place there called suggested reading, right? Or additional reading, whatever you want to call it. Again, those are books that your faculty believe are valuable, top-notch quality sources for your class. Each of those sources have what in them? Bibliographies and references. So you know that those are quality, qualified, peer-reviewed sources, and you know that the sources that they use are. So before you even went to the library or did anything else, I'm just telling you, right in the syllabi, there's the textbooks you're using, there's the bibliography of those textbooks, and there's the suggested reading, and there's the bibliography of those suggested readings. So you should be able to find you should be able to find 10 sources at least, just out of that. Next, go down to the dictionary and reference section, first few rows in our library, or in any library. Just in the reference section, that's where there's dictionaries, encyclopedias. You go in there and you look under S for sanctification. And I pick out 4 different theological dictionaries. And I sit down, again, I got to put this on my schedule. I'm going to go down there on a certain day, spend some time in the library. A lot of times those resources are not able to be checked out in the reference library. So you have to go down there and sit down a little bit. So, make yourself some time, take out some of those books, sit down and say, okay, under S, get this theological dictionary, here's sanctification. And then turn to that article and look at it and analyze the actual form of the article. Look at its introduction, look at its main headings, notice how it develops the ideas related to sanctification. Notice how it presents multiple major views. And at the end of the article, guess what's there? Bibliography, right? Okay, cool. Take notes on all that. Go to the next one. Look up sanctification. Again, you start noticing similarities. You start seeing some repeated works. You start seeing some repeated authors. Those are key people that are related to this topic of sanctification. You should probably use some of those sources. Your professor probably is aware of those sources too. Wink, wink, wink. Right? So that we understand this is what we're looking for. So I'm expecting you to be able to kind of find some of these things. And I'm going to tell right away to see if you looked at any of this stuff. Because once you know what button to push and what lever to pull, we all can come to the same understandings as far as information pretty quick, who these authors are. Notice how they talk about this. After you do this about 3 or 4 times, you may have walked in that day to the library saying, well, I'm going to do my paper on sanctification. But you may walk out saying, it seems to me like over and over again now I see how there's these 4 major views. I'm going to write my paper on the 4 major views of sanctification. And then you're refining it, and then you might end up saying, I'm going to do a paper that's comparing and contrasting the 4 major views on sanctification. And I may have not realized it when I walked in, but after spending an hour or 2, I walk out going, okay, everyone kind of talks about this in these 4 major views. And now I can cite those dictionaries, encyclopedias, and I can look up sources that they cited. Okay, are you following me? I'm hoping you're getting excited. Now, right here, instead of saying determining the subject or topic, probably it's better for me to change this slide to say refining. Because now if I already had a general idea I want to do on sanctification, but now I walk out doing something on the 4 views of sanctification because I've learned something just from spending some time with the literature. So now you really are refining your thesis statement It's very clear. It's very focused. It tells us about the purpose. It's very specific. That's why we would say in this paper, we will compare and contrast the 4 major views on sanctification. That's a good working, thesis statement because it tells the reader exactly what they're going to do. It prepares them. They can put on their seatbelt and they know here's what we're going to do. We're going to now compare and contrast. They're expecting that. It sets up an expectation. It gives you a very clear map to follow what you're going to be writing on. Number 2 now is working with sources. Okay, so now let's say I've done that first step and I've identified some really good sources. And now I've gone and I've gotten them. I've gotten some books from the library. I've downloaded some PDF articles, got some peer-reviewed stuff. I got a lot of good stuff. I got to process it now. So this takes time again. I have to have time because now I've got sources. I've got books. I got articles. I got all this stuff. What am I going to do with it? So picture me down in Mission Valley with my headphones on, listening to some Chris Bode. Anyone know who Chris Bode is? Chris Bode? Anyone know Chris Bode? Smooth jazz, right? He's a famous Italian trumpetist, right? Oh, it's good stuff. So now you're going to be like schmoogling Chris Bode. But imagine me, I got my Americano. I got my headphones on, right? I got my books, I got my sources, and I literally will like just spend some time with my stuff. I'm going to pick up one book at a time. I'm going to look at one article at a time, and I'm just going to start analyzing them and summarizing them and reading through them and noting some things. So I need to get an initial review. So here's a quick way of kind of being able to process some of this stuff to see how you would use it. Because, your time is valuable. You're trying to manage your time, and you've got these sources. You've got this paper you got to write. So the first thing I would do is read the abstract if it has one. The abstract gives you a good idea of what's in that book. Right away you can know, yeah, this is usable, or maybe it is, maybe it's not. Tell you right away. Next, look at the forward and the introduction to the book. If it's a book, or if it's a dissertation, something like that, that will give you a good idea of what's in there. Next, look at the table of contents. A lot of times I will look at the table of contents, and I'll notice certain chapters that are especially relevant to what I'm trying to learn. I go, ooh. So I might turn right to that chapter. And when I get to that chapter, I want to read the introduction to the chapter and the conclusion of that chapter. Because that gives me a good idea of what's in that chapter. Next, I want to go through that chapter and look at what all the headings were and subdivisions and see how the author developed their thoughts. Now, again, I'm doing stuff that are time-saving measures. Right? I'm working through this stuff because I'm trying to gain insight quickly and in a very systematic way. And then I'm going to look and review the bibliography in that source, because now that's giving me some more ideas of sources. Now comes note-taking. Okay? Right now, I got to change your paradigm. Think of your notes as a major source for your paper. Right? So you've got your Bible, you've got your literature review, right? You've got books, articles, and dissertations, things have been published. You've got your Bible, and you've got your notes. So you need to elevate the value and the importance of your notes, because your notes become a source. When you sit down and write the paper, you're going to incorporate these things, right? The biblical text, the professional peer-reviewed published literature, and your notes. Your notes house your thoughts, right? That's where all your thinking and that's where all your formulating of your ideas are captured there. That's your own little book related to this. That's your own source. So you need to have an effective strategy. And number one, I say, what strategy do you want to use? Some people do the note cards, and they get really sophisticated, and they color code them, and they move them around, and they visually can lay them out, they can organize them, they can go through them, they can do it that way. I have to use a notebook. So I have an actual Office Depot spiral-bound notebook, right? Not the 3-ring binder, but a spiral-bound notebook. And it's 3 subjects. It always has 3 sections, okay? And they've got the little manila, slide-in little thing that separates them. So my first section there, I always reserve that first section of the 3-ring binder for my own kind of administrative notes, right? Like if I'm going through a book and it mentions a certain source or a book that sounds interesting to me, I'll go to my first part of my notebook and I'll say, remember to go to the library and look for this book titled so-and-so, written by so-and-so, and here's the date. In other words, I give myself administrative notes, right? Check on this, look for that. In other words, as I'm sitting there, things come to mind that I need to do administratively related to this paper, and then I'll go and write that down on myself in the front. Second section is where I go through my three subject little binder, little spiral bound thing. That's where I go source by source, book by book, article by article, and just write down my review of it. What was the purpose? What was the do? What were they trying to study? What was interesting about it? I just put all my notes about that source. Okay. Then in the third section, I write down my own thinking about it. I notice things. I think, oh, so-and-so wrote this, and it sounded a lot like this other thing. And now I'm looking, I'm realizing there's like these 4 different authors, all kind of were the same area, but these were kind of weird. So I'll put my own mental process will go in that third section, right? And it's what's really weird is I have when I'm done with these, I save them. I never look at them again. Right, so in my den, it's creepy. So in my den, I have my library. So it's like a beautiful mind. I have these little stacks of little worn out ones that go back to like 2004, right, and beyond. They're all dusty, right? They're like the original manuscripts. They're all down there, and it's like, I never looked at them again. But trust me, once you get done writing this whole thing, it's really hard to just throw it in the fire, you know? It's like, you know, yeah, right? It's kind of intimate. You guys spend time with this thing, and you spend some quality time together, you and this little book. And so it kind of goes on the little shelf, and then it ends up in a box, and it ends up out in the garage, and then I die, and my kids find it. What's this junk? Throw it away.
You scare yourself if you look at it. Don't
right?
Don't
This
look
is right. Some people do it right on their computer. I could not do that. That would not work for me. To do it on my computer it would not work for me. Because I need to be able to draw, I need to be able to think, I need to write, I need to be able to move around. I need to have that. I need to have a pencil, not a pen, and I have to have my 3-ring binder. My point is, do what works for you, because you have to elevate your thinking and your practice about note taking. Right? So do what works for you when it comes to that. You have to leave yourself a trail. So you want to make sure you label things, cite references, put that all in your notes. Note any essential information, relevance, usefulness, page numbers. The worst thing is when you come back later and you're like, oh, now what book was that in? Oh, that was really good. And you're looking through the book and I'm sure, you can even kind of remember where it was on the page. No, it's not. Darn it. So you've got to make sure you capture that. So I decided to give you a whole nother outstanding quotes, including page numbers, relevant information, how it's useful. But write down that it's useful. You have to write future you a letter. Right? So your note, if you come back later and look at your notes, and you can't figure out what you put in there, and they don't make sense even to you, they're no good. You've got to create yourself a source. So you need to give full enough notes in there that you can go back and understand them later and then write from them. Okay, so here's a whole nother screen of things that you could note. Note the author's statements, statement of an issue, definition of teaching. Like, especially if you see someone where they define something really well, you might say, oh, I'm going to quote that. Those are great. When you find really good definitions, those make great quotes. Note information on the background development. Note the analysis of concepts or themes related to a specific topic. Anyway, this is, and you're going to get this PowerPoint. So just know that there's a whole bunch of good ideas that I have for you. These are all just good ideas for you to have. So make notes for all these things.
You said we're going to get the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We're supposed to try to.
Yeah, because there's no way you can keep up with this. I'm going to take some ibuprofen just so I can talk faster. Have less pain, just so I can keep going, go longer and faster.
You're going to eat some sugar so I can keep up with it.
There. Even though my back's hurting, I just medicated so I keep going. Now I'm ready for another 3 hours. Anyway, note taking, developing key ideas, super important. Creating an outline. Again, this is a funnel. This can be the general background, and then more historical development of the idea, and then analysis of the big ideas and concepts, and then how you would apply them. So in other words, you could work, that could be a way of a generic outline. Just a generic outline. So look at it again, there's the funnel. That's my funnel in the background. That's as good as I could get. Because when I originally made this, they didn't have an actual funnel graphic. Now they probably have one that like moves around and stuff. Have you guys ever seen Prezi? The Prezi presentations? Oh, they're super impressive, but if they're not done right, they can induce motion sickness. Because they like spin and turn and do all this crazy stuff, right? Whew. Anyway, here it is again, moving from the general, getting to the specific and the application. That's just a very good rule of thumb to think that way. Step 3, you guys need a little break? You want to keep powering through? Keep going? You guys want some ibuprofen? I always keep some in my pocket. Never know when you're going to have to pop another 600 milligrams. Oh, okay. Structure of the paper. There it is. The title page, table of contents, introduction. The introduction exists to create interest and state the purpose. And usually I can turn your title page over. I can go to your first page of your paper. I can see where it says introduction. And I should be able to take my finger and put it down right on either the second to last or one of the last sentences in your introduction. And there under my finger should be your thesis statement. So I should know right away where to find your thesis statement. It's going to be pretty much at the end of your introduction. It's going to tell me right there, this paper, you will compare and contrast the 4 major views on sanctification. It's right there. Then there's the main body, and that's where you develop, that's where you have your main headings, which kind of went on with your outline. And that's where you do all subheadings if you need to. Most of the time you don't need to do subheadings, except if it's like a capstone, like a doc synopsis, doc summary, the dissertation, that thing we have even subheadings. But typically main headings suffice in a typical paper. And then in your conclusion, no new information. You don't add a 5th of something, right? You know, you've done 4, you've done the 4 major views, don't bring up a 5th. Oh, and another thing, in other words, the conclusion and the introduction introduces, the introduction introduces the idea, the purpose, and the thesis statement. The conclusion restates the thesis and purpose and summarizes the content and restates the implications. So the introduction and the conclusion literally bookend the thing. All of the content is in the body. All of the content is in the body. This is introducing the body and concluding, which reflects back on what you said in the body. But in the body of the paper, that's where you're doing that's your content. That's your major content. And then your bibliography. Now, again, Jennifer has a template, right? That literally it's a Travian template. I wonder if she's an APA one also. That would make sense, wouldn't it? And literally, if you follow that, it will guide you. Have you all seen it or downloaded it or got it somehow? Super important to have that. That template is like, it's golden. It's like gold. I could sell it to other schools. Don't you steal my template? Actually, they probably already have, right? Because they share the library. I know, they share the library. I get it. Well, nobody else has that. Nobody else has it. What? Oh, you're terrible. You should have me come down and do it. Okay. So writing task. Is that what it was? What's your best time to do your research? No. I mean, literally, time of day.
Time of day.
What's your best time of day to like do that part where I was talking about where you go start looking through the books and the articles and write down notes? When's your best time of the day to do your early morning?
For me, I think
Early morning?
Research, yeah.
How about late at night, anyway?
No, that's when I flow.
Some people are late at night. The goal, again, is to just know your best time and stick to it. What's your best time to write? Same?
10:30.
In the morning? At night? Okay, see? So now that flip-flop. What's your best place? For me, my best place to study, honestly, I like going to like a Starbucks. I like listening to my own smooth jazz. Listen to some blues, put on some music. I like sitting there, maybe outside, maybe inside. I like just kind of the light movement. People like walking around, it's kind of distracting. You kind of look up every once in a while, and then but for writing, it's typically morning. It's usually morning, 7 to 11, right? And if I usually have less than an hour, forget about it. I mean, it takes me at least an hour to warm up. That's what I found. I need like 3 hours. So if I try to say, well, I'll try to do this an hour here, an hour there, I'm doomed. I've just messed myself up numerous times doing that. So I got to know. And when I write, it's got to be quiet. Absolute quiet, solitude, focus, no distractions, minimum of 3 hours least 2 hours, 2 to 4 hours. Studying, Starbucks, headphones, music. So know thyself. That's my whole point, is know yourself. What's your best time? What's your best place? A lot of times when we get papers back, there's issues in what we call writing mechanics, grammar, syntax, missing words, things like that. So one of the best things you can do is Hacker's Writing Guide, Diana Hacker. We have them down in the library. You can look at them on Amazon.com. They're writing guides, and they help you with writing mechanics. A lot of things we see are colloquialisms, which is kind of slang, non-professional language, run-on sentences, quotes that don't have a leading phrase, using a quote as a standalone sentence, not citing things correctly. So a lot of those things you'll see get marked up. These can help you. So the guides and tips, use those. Use Diana Hacker. Use OWL, Purdue, OWL, the online writing lab at Purdue University. It's free. They have exercises. They have samples. They really help a lot, so you want to use that. Those are the kind of things, because there's usually like 10 points at least in any assignment, I would say, job general, that are kind of assigned to format, writing mechanics, use of language, even beyond context, content. So those things are important. Library and learning resources, check with our librarians. Jennifer, she's got all kinds of help with this, right? If you're having some problems with grammar, with syntax, with writing, they've got help for that. So you want to use that. Academic writing. I'm going to run through this real quick, and I'm going to tell you the secret. Ready? I'm going to tell you the secret. Academic writing is clear, it's concise, it's direct, it's more professional. It uses active voice instead of passive, which means it's, here's some examples of that, but basically the idea is that it is concise and specific. So by the way, remembering this is make every word count. That's direct, that's concise, it's active voice. Make every word count. Passive voice, run-on sentence would be as often as you can when you're writing in your sentences, try to use the most appropriate words in the sentences to get your meaning across when people read your paper. That was a really lousy, giant run-on, not clear, not concise sentence. So brevity is king. When you shoot for brevity, when you shoot for clear, concise, and direct, you get active voice. And also when you look at your passive in here, it's where the how you use your verbs and the subject, and in what order they fall. Now, you ready for the big secret? It's coming. Maintain a modest and tentative tone. You want to use some, somewhat, and often in your writing. If you say never, all, or none, I'm going to say, really? Never? What are you going to have to cite to me, your instructor, to support never? I mean, you can't do it. So you have to realize that's why we say. Now, if you say it would seem that the majority view on this is thus and so, and then you cite 6 people. Okay, that's fair enough. I can see where you would think that. Now, if you say the majority view on this is this, it's like 1 person. I'm like, really? You see, so if you say the stronger the assertion, the higher level of support you need, right? So if you're going to make a strong assertion, you need to have strong support. So it's good to maintain a modest and tentative tone, and make sure you cite. Use standard professional vocabulary appropriate to your readership, which is your professor in this case. I've had times where people in church would read one of my papers and say, dude, you don't talk like that, like in church. I go, well, of course not. No one would know what I'm saying. But you literally have to kind of put on a persona. You know what else I used to do? I'll tell you another secret from the student side. I used to sit there and imagine, how would Professor so-and-so say this in class? I kind of channel their persona, and I would write it thinking, now, let's see, how would they say this? Right? And I would think, is that kind of naughty? But I tell you what, I would do that, and I'd turn in the fact that the professor would love it. Oh, this is great stuff. And I think, well, of course it is. I use your voice.
He's listening.
Right? This is why you would say it. No contractions. In other words, we do not write don't. So make every word count. We do not, get it? Write don't, because that's not professional language. No colloquialisms, whether casual, slang, popular phrases. Okay, now we're ready, I think, for, yes, we're ready for the big secret. Because students often say, so I'm still not clear on academic writing and, how does it read? What does it look like? All of those peer-reviewed articles, all of your textbooks, all of the sources you've been using, they're not just sources of information and content for your paper, they're all examples of academic writing. Right? Did the light bulb go on for anyone in the room at all? So when you're looking at those articles and you're doing that, you're not just studying for information to include in your paper. Notice how they write. According to Baker, the year, this theme has been brought up numerous times and has often been refuted by such authors as so-and-so. I mean, you see how they interact with sources, how they quote them, how they summarize them, how they introduce them. They're samples of academic writing. Make your writing look like that. Make it read like that. Right? They don't use quotes as standalone sentences. Notice how they interact with these sources. It's the best thing you can do is have an actual model. Well, what does this look like? I don't understand. It's all the stuff you're reading. It's in your hand already. You're holding the magic key the whole time. Right? It's right there. I hope that helps somebody. Here's the whole thing on paragraphs, so we're not going to get into that. I'm not going to get into that. But here's one thing I did realize. The way you knit your paragraphs together, right? It's flow and it's structure. So something we look for and something we want to improve in is our flow and our structure. Paragraph is, and I put up here, it's the basic unit of composition in English writing. So that's why you indent that, a full tab space, right? Don't space over anything. Just hit the tab once, it indents it, and that's a paragraph. The reason we do paragraphing is because each one of those introduces, develops, and concludes a thought. And then it links like a chain to the next one. So you're literally linking paragraphs together. That's how we do things in English. So if I told you to write a 3-paragraph essay with an introduction paragraph and a conclusion, right? If I said that would be what, a 5? What if you wrote a 5? What if I told you to write a 5-paragraph essay? Paragraph 1 introduces. You come up with 3 main points. Paragraph 1, 2, and 3 are each a paragraph of each point, and then a final paragraph that's a concluding paragraph. Right? And what if I said do that? Could you do that? Here's paragraph 1's introduction, paragraph 5 is conclusion, and there's 3 paragraphs that each develop a point. Right? Now, what if I said each one of those 3 paragraphs that develop a point have to also be 5 sentences? And the first sentence of each paragraph has to introduce the thought, 3 sentences develop that thought, and the final sentence in that paragraph transitions to the next paragraph. So you're going to write 3 paragraphs, each 5 sentences long. Do you see? I mean, when you really break it down into a methodology, it all starts to make sense. And then what if I say, make that into 5 chapters? An introductory chapter, 3 chapters, developing in 3 major points, and a conclusion. It's the same thing, from whether you're writing an essay, a term paper, or even a dissertation. It just takes it's like the exact same Legos and just building a bigger structure. But it really just kind of follows the same rules. So here's some transitional words that you want to use in your paragraphs and in order to move from paragraph to paragraph. And you can use these words, they're free, and they're not copywritten words. You know what I'm saying? Because they just exist. But these are the types of words we look for. So then I said, well, what if I give you some more words to play with that are also free and not copywritten? Now, these are some words that we use to introduce, use as signal phrases and leading phrases for paragraphs. Because I still see this where a student will start a sentence with a quotation mark and end with a quotation mark and a citation and then a period. You can't do that. You have to say, according to Baker, and then comma, and then quote Baker, and then cite Baker. But these are all wonderful ways where you talk about so-and-so defends something or describes or denies or affirms or accepts. This is really good cognitive thinking. This is really good critical thinking skills. It's great for academic writing. We love, as faculty, we love this stuff. We love this. In fact, I got so excited, I gave you a whole nother page, just some conceptualization terms. If you can talk about how something validates, or if something is a modification of something else, or if you break something down into its components or articulate a framework, oh my gosh, this is nerd heaven. Dr. Crocker is going to love that, right? He loves that kind of stuff. You can demonstrate a relationship, define a theory, show how something integrates or how something is a consequence of something else. This is the kind of stuff. This is the language of good academic writing. These are the kind of things we're looking for. Amen? I'm going to take an offering. You ready to write the paper now? Here we go. Citations and quotations. It's terrain or APA format. Place a citation to document stated information or a strong assertion. Put it right there. Following a direct or indirect quote. So it's word for word, exact. It's in quotations and it's cited. If it's an indirect quote, in other words, if you're like paraphrasing it, doing it your own way, or citing someone else, you cite it at the end. You still cite it. If it's a summary or a synthesis or comment related to sources. In other words, even if you have an idea and you're synthesizing some things, summarizing some things that you got from these other sources, you present that summary and then you state right in there that a summary of this idea would include the various ideas presented by so-and-so, 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 and then present it. See, so you still, because you didn't just wake up in a trance and have this idea, right? You're summarizing or synthesizing or bringing together something based on sources, and so you cite them, following a stated view, theory, or idea that relates either directly or indirectly to a source. See, so people are always thinking, I don't know when to cite. Literally, in academic writing, I don't want to see a page go by without some citations. You're interacting with sources all the time, or else it's just an opinion. It's just your own personal opinion. We're not looking for that. We want to see you interacting with the sources, being able to cite them, do those things. Now, I used to tell people, don't worry, you can't oversight. And then a couple of years ago, I actually got a paper, and I looked at one of the pages, and it was a big paragraph, and it had the same citation at the end of every sentence in that whole paragraph. And so I had to smile to myself because I thought, okay, for years I've been telling people you can't oversight, and someone did it. So I had to go back with them and I had to say, now, based on your language, your writing, it's clear that you're still working with the same source. So once you introduce this whole paragraph, and once you start talking about what's in this section, in this document, and you cited them, it was clear by context that everything else in your paragraph was related to that source. And so you didn't need to cite that, they just didn't understand the mechanics. And so they literally put the same citation at the end of every citation period, at the end of each sentence in a paragraph. And I actually said, oh, congratulations. I've always said you can't possibly cite too much, and you did. But they didn't understand, you see, because contextually you understood they introduced an author. You could tell they were still talking about that author. So they didn't have to keep doing that stuff. But it is really important because we get nervous when we don't see any citations. We just think you're doing stuff. What is plagiarism? It's the F word, because it gets you an F. How about that? What is plagiarism? It's not just words and sentences, but it's ideas and structure. Even if you portray someone else's ideas or even structure your argument in a way that's the way somebody else did that, that's still plagiarism. It's still intellectual property. So using someone else's ideas without acknowledging the source, you just need to acknowledge it. You're going to modify something. I mean, I did that in my first dissertation. I modified, there's Jack Mesereau's framework on transformative learning was stated this way, and I based my research, I did my research on that, I talked about that a lot, and then I proposed a revised framework, a revision of Mesereau's framework, where I then, in italics, added some words and did some things, but it was very clear what I was doing was taking Mesereau's framework and modifying it based on my research. That's how you do that. And so you need to acknowledge those things. So your voice is still in there, You're still analyzing and summarizing and noticing things, but you're working with sources. And you have to make it so that if someone else comes on and reads your paper, they can go back and corroborate. They can go back and find what you saw and understand why you came to that conclusion. So paraphrasing someone else's arguments, presenting someone else's line of thinking, presenting an entire paper. Now, I actually had, back in the old days, before we had the plagiarism checking software and stuff like we have now, I actually was reading this student's paper, and they were an okay writer, and they were a pretty good student, and they were, they had a certain level of academic engagement. And all of a sudden, I got to this one page, and all of a sudden, they must have gotten possessed by an academic spirit, because all of a sudden, for like a page and a half, the writing was really good. And all of a sudden, they were using all these really good words, and it was really sophisticated. And it was like, and I'm reading it, and then all of a sudden, it went back to them again. I'm like, oh, they got delivered, or something happened. What happened? I was just reading through it. All of a sudden, it got really good, and then it went away again. I'm like, that was weird. So I literally, it was back in the day. I copied that whole page and a half. I copied it and just pasted it right into Google. And I got like 4 hits on it. I said, oh no, my heart just sank. It broke my little heart. It broke my heart. Because they had just plugged that thing in there. And that was sad. So I had to send them a link to 4 different places where I found it. And I had to talk to them. And I had to talk to them and have a meeting with them and say, I pulled this and plugged it in there. Yeah. And so they admitted it. That's a problem. Don't let that happen to you. Don't let that happen. Document everything. Give credit and leave a document trail for others to follow. Step 4. You ready? Think process. Think, I'm going to have a first draft of this. I'm going to have a second draft of this, and I'm going to turn it in. Okay, and then we turn in the final paper. So again, you got to do some time management. So you can say, okay, here's when it's due. If I want to give myself to revise this and turn it in. So what's your methodology? Again, here's what I have to do for mine. I have to print it out and staple it. And I have to sit down with my red pen and pretend like it's somebody else's paper. Because if I try to do it on screen on my computer, my brain fixes it. And I miss it. Right? So again, I'm just giving you guys any kind of hint I can give you to help you out. So for me, I actually have to get away from the computer, print it out, get into another context, take it out and read it. And start circling things and making notes on it and correct. You're literally correcting your own paper. You're correcting somebody else when you're editing it. It's super valuable. You just literally spend time editing your own paper. And you'll think, oh my gosh, look at all the things if I were to turn this in, oh my gosh, I would get one of Gino's stories in his next writing workshop. So I'm glad I can spend a little time with this. Proofreading, if you read it aloud, you're going to catch more grammatic errors, missing words, stuff that's not right as far as the way it's written. If you read it out loud, you'll actually catch. Especially if you're having some real challenges there, you're not getting consistently what you want out of feedback and grades. Read it aloud. It'll help you with writing mechanics and syntax and that sort of thing. If you have an outside reader, that helps you with clarity. So that looks like this. I say, hey, you want to read my paper? Take a look at this paper. And you read it. And then you say, oh, that's a good picture. You come back and you say, I'm not sure what you mean right here. What were you trying to say? It's not really clear. And then I say, well, what I meant was thus and so. And you go, that you should write that.
Right.
See, because that way it was real clear to you a lot. Sometimes it's real clear to you because you're filling in the blanks. It's like stucco or dry. It's like you're working on the house and you smear some mud over that thing and paint it, and it's all good, right? So your brain does that. So sometimes you want to have somebody read it. Sometimes I recommend that. Sometimes I don't. If it's your spouse, because sometimes that can be problematic, depending on your relationship, the nature of your relationship. But again, just give yourself some time to edit. Seriously, give yourself some kind of a method, some kind of a way. So here's our traditional editing checklist. Is my writing accurate, concise, engaging? Do I have a clear, articulated, focused thesis? Again, I'll get this to you. It'll be on our website. So, am I doing all these things? So you can actually use this as an editing checklist if you want. These kind of ideas. Just go through and say, let me sit there with my. But you got to give yourself time, right? You got to have a couple days before it's due to have a draft that's good enough for you to look at and to proofread and edit, and then make some revisions and turn them in. Okay, we talked about Al Purdue. That's just an old link. You can't even hardly see it anymore. But if you just type in Al Purdue in your Smarty Pants phone or in your laptop on the internet machine, you'll find an interweb machine. You'll find Al Purdue Writing Lab. That's good. Bedford St. Martin. They've got a writing lab too. That's pretty good. You might want to check that out. Travian, 8th edition. Diana Hacker. This was 7th edition, 2010. I'm sure there's one newer than that now, so I've got to update that. Hacker is good. It's kind of expensive, but that's a good reference. Travian. I also should have put the APA up there. There's nothing better than having the handbook, because if you show me the handbook and you say, well, this is how the handbook's going to do it, I'm going to be, that's cool then. Even if I tell you to do it a different way, if you show me in the handbook where it says do it that way, the handbook wins. Right? Got my Bible, got my Travian. Good. Done. So that's what I tell students. And now, see, sometimes you download templates, and other people, not our library template, because Jennifer does a great job, but like sometimes Word has like a feature where it puts things in a Travian or APA. That's always different. So you have to know that it doesn't always do it right. So it's better to take that look yourself and use the template, use the stuff that we give out. That's good. This is a really good book too. It's been updated. I think it's the 4th edition now, Betty Meister. Quality Research Papers for Students of Religion and Theology. As far as I know, it's the only one of its kind. And it's a really good little book. And like I said, I think there's a 4th edition now as well. And that's it. Wow, what time is it?
You did it, 9:30.
It's 8:30.
We rolled the clock back.
I got done 5 minutes early. That never happens.
You have your broken. Did it.
In a church building or in a school, that never happens. Any initial questions or any thoughts? Is anyone glad they came?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Very.
Very much.
All right, let's pray. Lord, thank you for, again, this opportunity. And I do pray success for every one of us. Lord, we know that in the days of our lives, there's all kinds of surprises, things that we aren't even aware of that could come along. So, Lord, we are joyfully dependent upon you. And we thank you for your ever-present grace in our lives. So, Lord, bless us now as we go. Continue to help us as we seek to have excellence in the work that we do here at our school. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Woo, okay. God bless you guys.
When is it going to be available online for us?
Tomorrow morning. Yeah. Or if you email me, send it to you. Bam.
Okay, thank you.
And what is the first name, last name?